Well, welcome everybody. It's so great to see you here tonight for the Anglers, River and Lake Lovers, How to Take Action on Climate Change. My name is Bill Barron and I'm the regional coordinator for the Mountain West region. So I'm supporting volunteers in Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada. And we're really happy to have you here tonight. And I'm really excited to introduce to you Paul Hancock, who graduated from the University of Northern Colorado in 1973 and ran an independent repping business, primarily selling hot tubs wholesale in all of the Intermountain states for the next 36 years. He retired at the end of 2015 and became a member of Citizens Climate Lobby in June of 2016. He's a former Rotarian, Chamber of Commerce, National Federation of Independent Business member, and a lifetime Trout Unlimited member. As Paul says, he's probably the 40th best fly fisherman in Pocatello, but he's determined and willing to learn new techniques every chance he gets. Thanks so much, Paul, and I'll pass it on to you.
Well, thanks, Bill, for that kind introduction. And thanks all of you for tuning in, even though this Zoom thing is always a little challenging. We'll try to do the best we can. Citizens Climate Lobby was started in 2007. We have over 500,000 members. We have 430 active chapters locally all over the country. We are single unit focused, the elimination of CO2 from the atmosphere. We're a grassroots organization who are trying to build the political will for our members of Congress to do something about climate change. We do in-person lobbying in our districts. So locally, we meet in the district, and then we go to Washington, D.C. to try to get action there. We are a nonpartisan outfit, and we have a bipartisan solution to climate change, or at least a good first step. Our local chapters are very diverse, and that's kind of good. It's not just a bunch of old guys like me, lots of young people from different backgrounds, and that certainly makes it interesting. We are the largest in-person lobbying group that shows up in Washington, D.C. There'll be 1,300 people in June, about 600 in November. Pre-COVID, this is all pre-COVID. During COVID, we did Zoom meetings, which weren't obviously as much fun, but we did bring in different people from different walks of life, and that was kind of cool. Every year in December, Yale does a poll about how people feel about climate change. And every year the numbers increase, the people who are concerned or alarmed. We still have about 20% that are dismissive, essentially, of climate change, but hopefully we can provide you with some ammunition that will help on that matter. I've been a trout fisherman for over 50 years, and I fish probably 70 days per year. I am not one of those winter fly fishermen. No, it's too cold. So I put my fly rods away the first week of December and I start skiing. I used to put them away the first week of November, but now I hang in there a little bit longer. Any of these outdoor sports, any of you veterans out there obviously have seen changes in the climate. One of the first things that I saw in the Rocky Mountain region, especially when I moved to Idaho in 1979, was the lack of snow at the ski areas. A place like Sun Valley ended up installing a tremendous amount of snowmaking. They were like the first guys in order to be able to be open. Unfortunately, you cannot make snow if it's not 32 degrees or below. And this has caused some problems with them and with lots of the lower altitude areas in the country. Obviously, the lack of snowpack means that you are going to have warmer rivers and lakes. Obviously, this last year, probably many of you have heard about the hoot owl rules that Montana had. That means at 2 o'clock, you had to be off the river or you were going to get a ticket. Now, I have been a Stillwater guy in a lot of ways since the movie A River Runs Through It, because the rivers, they started getting too crowded. So I fish in April and May and June. I do fish a lot of Stillwater, although now by the middle of June, I'm starting to get concerned about the temperature of the water, and I begin to switch over to Spring Creek fishing. Obviously, this additional heat causes bacteria, parasites, not good for our trout. I happen to be friends with a young fellow who's a DEQ scientist, and they've actually come out with recommendations for pregnant people and for people under the age of 18 in terms of the consumption of trout and bass, like 4 servings per month. And they're concerned about this because what they theorize is the acid rain coming from in the jet stream, coming from Asia, probably China or India, into the water. The other challenge of this is, obviously it affects the ecosystem, stops the hatch, of certain types of bugs and aquatic life, all very nasty stuff for our fish. Heat kills. In the summer of 2019, there was a tremendous loss of salmon up north near in the Alaskan area. And you guys may have heard that this past December, it was 67 degrees in Fairbanks. Also, just 2 days ago in Antarctica, the normal temperature now in Antarctica is 50 below zero. Just a couple of days ago, it was 10 above zero. So the polar regions of the country, north and south, are more impacted temperature-wise than the middle latitudes. Obviously, while all this is happening, the CO2 turns around from the atmosphere and dives into the ocean. Now, scientists really can't agree on how much goes into the ocean, maybe 40%, maybe 90%. But one thing is sure, the ocean is becoming more acidic, killing coral reefs off, and the ocean is getting warmer, exacerbating the hurricanes. Now, for those of you who would like to go bone fishing, and I have been bone fishing one time, I caught 1 bonefish, and I realized that if I was going to become a bone fisherman, I would need to move down there and spend a month if I was just able to find where to cast. But that shallow water is definitely susceptible to the heat problems. Now, if you would like a more thorough and detailed report on the state of trout, the National Resource Defense Council, in conjunction with the Trout Unlimited Council in Montana, which is all 12 of those chapters, they have a 36-page white paper on what is happening, with our trout species. And they really get into more of the detail on the science of trout than what we will do today. Back in Colorado, growing up in Colorado, I saw a little bit of beetle kill, but through the years moving to Idaho, when the temperature didn't seem to get to be 20 below zero anymore, it seems like I saw more and more and more beetle kill. Unfortunately, because it doesn't get 20 below, you don't kill the beetles. And what ends up happening is you get a lot more wildfires and a lot more intensity. In discussions with our member of Congress, he told us that the Forest Service budget has been wiped out several years now fighting fires. Fortunately, in 2018, and thanks to some degree, our own senators passed the Wildlife Disaster Fund Act, which put $2 billion into a wildfire fund. And this at least provides the mechanism for the Forest Service to do the maintenance and clear all the deadfall that's out there. Now, it's a decades long of work to do to clear this deadfall, but at least the mechanism is there. Smoky sports in the mountain states. Now, I am seriously considering getting a gas mask. Now, I'm probably crazy and darn sure stupid to be out there fishing in this type of weather. But, for 6 or 8 weeks every summer, it's pretty nasty out there. I have a choice, but, our construction workers, our paver workers, our agriculture workers, they don't have a choice. Policemen, firemen, they've got to work outside. And this is pretty nasty conditions to be working outside. When it comes to kids, they probably spend too much time indoors, as an old guy like me would say. However, it's like the last in-person Trout Unlimited club that I did a presentation with, the Cutthroat Club in Idaho Falls, Idaho. One of the members there teaches 5th grade. And he said that 25% of his 5th graders had respiratory issues and were receiving some type of medical attention. pretty nasty stuff. And Idaho Falls isn't like a smokestack community. No. Now, all this scientific ammunition before and all the scientific ammunition that you ever get may or may not do you any good. Unfortunately, conservation issues, environmental issues are associated with the left, and the emotional tribal issues sometimes gets in the way of people's logical thinking. I will be the first to admit, as a Denver Bronco fan, sometimes I don't see that pass interference because I'm a Denver Bronco fan. However, let me give you a suggestion. It's not so much a debate as a discussion. I, like probably many of you, have a climate denying fishing partner. And I would recommend you say this: well, Jimmy, I am not going to try to convince you of man's impact on climate change. However, may I share with you the benefits of a locally based alternative energy economy? Now, hopefully, this spurs a conversation that we'll get into as we go along. Why transition to clean energy? Well, national security, the USA, effective foreign policy, and the costs. Now, you will see on reasons 1 through 3 that there is a common thread of the costs involved. Unlike 4, which everybody hears about, save the planet, stop the extinction, and for selfish people like me, save our outdoor way of life. But it is these 3 first reasons that we need to focus on to get bipartisan action: national security, effective foreign policy, personal and collective human health, and the increasing costs to the system; macroeconomics, the increasing costs of disasters, and the creation of a circular or sustainable economy. I have heard that the word sustainable can be a little prickly for some folks. So it's better to use a bean counter or an economist word like circular, because with 7 billion people, we need to create, a more circular economy. Also, we need to generate more exports for our farms and our businesses through a border carbon adjustment, which we will get into in a couple of minutes. But understand this: the United States is 3 times more carbon efficient as China and India, 3 times more carbon efficient in the production of goods. Our grid is susceptible to cyber attacks. I'm sure you've read about this. A smart grid would be hardened by both local energy production and storage. Our military is spending $81 billion per year, excluding war zones, defending world fossil fuel supply as of 2018, which translates to 28 cents per gallon for consumers, according to CNBC. Bad actors in the fossil fuel industry exert political control. We've all, for years, talked about the Middle East and Iran and Saudi Arabia. Unfortunately, the last 30 days, we are seeing the influence, the power, the devastation from national security that Russia has over the EU and Asian countries. It is at this time that I introduce to you a fellow group called Climate Leadership Council. Now, these people that you're seeing on the screen, you may have heard of: James A. Baker and George Shultz, Reagan cabinet members, Marty Feldstein, and a fellow named Halstead started Climate Leadership Council in February of 2017. And a couple weeks later, they got a sit down with Mr. Trump face to face. Now, it didn't do much good, but it did raise the profile of a carbon fee or a carbon tax to the greater general public, as well as to fiscal conservatives like myself. The carbon dividends is their program. That's what they call it. It starts at $40 per metric ton of CO2 burned, the gas, as it's burned up into the atmosphere. They then increase that fee or tax 5% per year plus inflation, but they return all the money back to consumers. This is called revenue neutral, which is a very positive word for fiscally conservative leaning folks. There's also a border carbon fee to protect our farms and our businesses on the import market and also, help us in the export market. 3,500 economists support this. And if you have time, please look in your local area for the economists supporting this. We have 8 of these economists in East Idaho from West Yellowstone down to the border, 8 economists that support this. 27 countries already have some type of carbon tax. 46 countries do some type of carbon trading, which we're not crazy about. The EU is discussing a border carbon adjustment to go along with their existing internal carbon tax. And since they get 50% of their imports from China, this is going to raise the price of that steel, that aluminum, that concrete that they're bringing from those folks, giving our farms and businesses a better chance to do some business. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, says carbon taxes are a powerful way to force polluters to pay for the harm they do. Our friend Mitt Romney, we can negotiate with the Chinese, or we can simply have a border carbon adjustment tax that recognizes they put a lot more pollution in the air. Now, if you've ever read any sort of trade agreement, first off, you need 6 lawyers. And second, the little minutiae and details, there's slipperiness in there. While this is a transparent, upfront policy that makes it a lot easier to manage. James A. Mattis, the retired general, climate change is impacting stability in the area of the world where our troops are operating. In 2019, the U.S. intelligence reports warn that climate hazards are intensifying, threatening infrastructure, health, water, and food security. And migration, like in Northern Africa, is presenting problems now, and it will continue to present problems if you can't earn a living farming in North Africa. We spend $11 billion per year defending the Strait of Hormuz. General Mattis says the carbon dividend plan makes sense if there's a chance of a catastrophic event. It's a good insurance policy. And there already is catastrophic events like 500-year floods every 2 years. The cost of fighting these disasters, once again, we go back to the cost. In the 80s, it used to be 19 billion. In the 90s, 30 billion. In the 2000s, 55. In 2010s, it was, I can't read my number on my screen. 80 billion, I forgot. And then the last 5 years, the average cost was $148 billion. These are numbers from NOAA, NOAA. You can look at NOAA and NASA, and there's great information on those 2 sites about the cost of these disasters and et cetera, why they're happening. Last year, Mark Carney, our special envoy, received commitments from companies totaling $130 trillion to cut emissions by half in 2030 and net zero by 2050. But this is another one of those cross your fingers Paris type of deal, that it will be much better to have a transparent upfront carbon fee. When it comes to personal and collective health, I have provided 2 websites for you. One is the CDC website, and one is the Medical Societies for Climate Health. Now, the CDC website is extremely thorough, and I really think it's very good. However, I understand if you think the CDC is poor at making decisions. So if you would prefer to look at the Medical Societies for Climate Health, feel free. Both of these websites will give you a tremendous amount of information about all the various problems that climate change is causing. And it is a long list of maladies that you can see. This is from the CDC website. And I mean, it goes into the minutia of all of these problems that are happening and the costs associated with. I do not feel comfortable giving a particular number on the cost. I have read anywhere from 100 billion to 820 billion this past year. But the problem that these analysis do is they can't separate our own personal responsibility for taking care of our own health with climate change. So if you're in lousy health, I mean, it's all bad. So I don't feel good about saying this is the number. You can look at these websites and come to your own conclusions. Aha, is CO2 bad for us? Now us to you guys, the oxygen, CO2, the exchange, what could be wrong with that? And I was a member of Sergeant Bud Smalley's river restoration crew, of which we did buck fence building and willow planting, and I'm sure many of you have. However, the problem when you burn greenhouse gases is these tiny little particulates, nitrous oxide, sulfur hexafluoride, methane, nasty stuff. And this doesn't even include the heavy metals, mercury, arsenic, and lead. These are all very nasty gases. And even if you really aren't convinced about climate change, this nasty stuff is not good for us. From a standpoint of global subsidies, currently there are $500 billion of subsidies, according to the Brookings Institute, with China, Russia, and the USA leading in these subsidies. The National Academy of Science and Brookings says that the United States has 20 billion of subsidies for fossil fuels. Now, you may have read the higher numbers, and I have read them too, but the problem is they are associating health costs. They are always throwing in health costs, and I don't want to do that. There's 20 billion of hard subsidies for the fossil fuel business, 2 billion for alternative energy folks. These are hard dollars. Now, Citizens Climate Lobby doesn't think we need any subsidies on energy. All we need to do is charge the people for putting fossil fuels up in the atmosphere. Now, simultaneously, we are seeing the plunging cost of alternative energy. Obviously, solar absolutely leads the way, wind not far behind. Now, we are seeing in certain parts of the mountain states where oil companies, since they have the rights to an abandoned oil well, are drilling now for hot water. They have the technology, the fossil fuel guys, to be big in the geothermal business, and Chevron is already big in the geothermal business. When it comes to natural gas, there is a plant now in LaPorte, Texas, that has figured out, it's got a lot of patents. It's called the Alum-Fetzweld patent, and it is taking natural gas in combination with oxygen and creating this very high density liquid. And their Mitsubishi has built them very tiny little turbines, like a tenth of the size of a regular turbine, and they are 97% eliminating the CO2. So we still can take advantage of this advantage of locally natural gas and do it much more effectively. And this company has 4 plants being built now in the United States and 1 in the United Kingdom. Alternative energy in general creates 3 times as many jobs as fossil fuel, according to Forbes. I've actually heard more than that, but according to Forbes, 3 times. Now, when it comes to carbon dividend, our plan, we place an increasing fee on fossil fuel at the source, mine, well, or port. Mine, well, or port. And we start at $15 a metric ton of burned CO2 in the atmosphere. And then we go up $10 per year after that. Okay. So by the 4th or 5th year, we catch up to the carbon dividend plan. So we give people more time to make their adjustment. We also give people the choice. If they want to keep on burning fossil fuel, okay, it's just going to cost more money. We return all the money back to households, a full share for mom, a full share for dad, half a share for the kids. We also had a border carbon adjustment fee to protect our businesses from the imports coming in. This is called HR 2307 in Congress, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. REMI and the University of Columbia say that within 10 years, we will reduce carbon emissions by 45%, and by 2050 will be net zero. HR 2307. And yes, National Trout Unlimited supports HR 2307. On a side note, this last summer in Utah, 23 Utah state Republicans, now these are current legislators, these are not retired guys, voted or endorsed and wrote an op-ed for carbon fee and dividend. Now, if you've ever fished the Green River, it's a very nice fishery and there's lots of outdoor sports in Utah. And so therefore you have quite a bit of conservative folks and Republicans who enjoy those sports. And if you've ever been in the Salt Lake Valley in the winter, it can be really nasty. They get 60% of their energy from coal, and that valley can be nasty. Also out of Utah, John Curtis, one of their reps, started the Conservative Climate Caucus, and their goal is market-based solutions to climate change above and beyond just carbon fee and dividend. If you have a member of Congress that you would like to get more involved in a market-based solution, have him join John Curtis's group. The monthly dividend check. REMI, Regional Economic Modeling Inc. says that 70% of the people will come out ahead. 70% of the people will come out ahead getting this check back. I've read as 50% of the people will be ahead of the game. Only 30% are going to pay more, but they have a choice. They can begin to make their change. And since we start so low, they have time to make that change to other types of energy. Who supports this? Well, you notice you don't see ExxonMobil up there. Now, ExxonMobil used to be up there, but unfortunately, a lobbyist got caught on a hot mic saying the only reason we're there is because of public relations. So they're out of in the carbon dividend plan, they're out. Now, these other folks, let's hope their motives are pure. We know that BP has pledged to be carbon neutral by 2050. We know it. Chevron is getting into the geothermal game. So let's hope that that is the case. One thing is for sure, ExxonMobil, in terms of their entire gross revenues, spends a tiny, tiny amount on alternative energy or carbon capture and sequestration, tiny amount. If you have a carbon fee, they will open up those deep pockets of the shareholders and spend a lot more money trying to make this happen because they don't want to lose their position in the market. Carbon fee and dividend, according to REMI, is going to create between $70 and $85 billion per year in increased GDP, and over 20 years, $1.375 trillion in GDP. Jobs created, 2.8 million jobs after 20 years. Now, we would love for you to take some action. You can do it via email at this website, cclusa.org/action. You can email your senator, your president, your congressman. You can also call them. We'd like you to call them. And now you will probably talk to an aide, but that's okay. They'll ask you where you're from, who your congressman is, all this kind of stuff, and you can give them your feedback. We have been told that if you can get 100 phone calls to a particular congressperson, that it puts that on the radar. Okay. Now, I'm sure big money puts you on the radar, but 100 phone calls puts you on the radar too. So we need all the help we can get. We want you to have them be for HR 2307, ask them to be for a revenue neutral carbon tax. It is important that you understand how influential Trout Unlimited is. When I was in the first meeting in 2007 with both our senators, after we talked a little bit and chatted, they asked what other groups we were with, because I'm sure they're thinking we're going to be nothing but lefty environmental groups. And I told them that I was a longtime Trout Unlimited member. Immediately, I was no longer this swinging lefty. I mean, the smile on their face. Oh, I know Steve, Chris. Oh, those guys are good guys, Chris. Yeah, da, 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 da. I mean, I was amazed at the way. So do not discount your influence over your congressperson, thanks to the folks in DC and Trout Unlimited. Currently, there are 10 local chapters, TU chapter affiliates, who support HR 2307. I thank you for your attention, and I will turn it back over to Bill in Utah, who's instrumental in getting a lot of this stuff done for the Utah folks. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks for presenting. We really appreciate you sharing, especially from your experience of being a lifetime Trout Unlimited person. So anyway, one of the first questions, first of all, I'd like to say again, if people have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. One of the questions I'm going to start out with, Paul, is, you talked about the three talking points: national security, personal and collective health, and macroeconomics impacts. With those talking points, what has been the most successful to use when you're talking with your fishing friends? Does one of them stand out as very appealing?
It's hard to say. I mean, some people are very, very concerned about national security, and therefore you will get some mileage. There are people who are very aware, especially military folks. You'll get some interest there in mileage. There are always people who are concerned about spending too much money, taxpayer money, and therefore the macroeconomic look of it. The advantages, of more farm exports. Of more exports in general, you'll get some mileage there. You don't get as much mileage on the healthcare, unfortunately. People, I guess, assume it's not that big a deal, but as it's smokier every year, it gets pretty obvious.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that, Paul. In the same vein, I'm curious, if you're trying to reach out and you're talking to fishermen that are, we're always working to develop more in the conservative space and get more engagement that way. And so how do you address the concerns that may come up, like you mentioned, in conversations, and to help try to move a fisherman to participate, an angler to participate in activities such as you do with Citizens Climate Lobby?
Well, I think outdoor sports people in general, people who really are outdoors, enjoying the outdoors, they care. They care. People who never get outdoors and just are indoors all the time, it's going to be tough with those people. But anybody who they're thoughtful. Most outdoorsmen are thoughtful about the problems that they're seeing, and they're not sure what the solution is. I mean, it's not an easy. We love our energy. I love energy. I love it. We just have to change our economy over from this dependence on fossil fuels, whether it's foreign or domestic. And we're ahead of the game technology wise in a lot of ways. So that carbon efficiency, certainly that argument should play well. But in general, I just think outdoor people are more susceptible to listen.
Excellent, Paul. Thanks for that. So another question is, so you talked about the carbon dividends proposal and then HR 2307, which is the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And both of those put a price on carbon emissions at the source. And the money that's collected is then distributed back to households equally. Right. And then we have that border carbon adjustment that you were talking about, where, if the US had a carbon price in play, then that would mean manufacturers from other countries shipping products into the United States would be assessed a tariff to level that playing field. And conversely, products made in the US being shipped out of country would be rebated so that the amount that they had paid extra for the carbon price would be taken away so that they are still competing equally. And the beauty of that is, like you talk about, is that it allows a carbon price to be harmonized around the world, because other countries will be incentivized to implement a carbon price to avoid that tariff. So with that in mind, do you feel like there is, a effort and energy to try to raise awareness to the fact to have action that's something that can impact not just our own country, but other countries as well?
Absolutely. I mean, energy is a world market. That's, the reality. You can't shy away from the fact that China and India are building coal plants like hotcakes. I mean, they're still, cooking along. So you have to look at this from a global macroeconomic standpoint. And it's the only way we're going to be able to wean ourselves, out of the fossil fuel game. And it's never going to be 100%, but, with carbon capture and the technology already occurring, we certainly can get better at what we've got going now.
Great. So I also got a question. This is sort of from Alex up in Montana, where last summer she got smoke that began July 5th and didn't let up until the end of October. And she's curious, what effect does that smoke have on the fish?
Well, that's out of my pay grade. We need to, somebody else on the call is going to have to jump into that one. I don't know.
Gotcha.
Somebody raise their hand.
Is there a raised hand out there? Here's a question. Has there been much analysis of how a carbon dividend might impact states that depend heavily on fossil fuel production and also have small populations? Alaska, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, et cetera. Has there been discussion of using the carbon dividends to go back into helping those states and communities transition their economies? You want me to jump in here? I'll just say that yes, as far as putting the dividends back to help individual states, the way the policy that Citizens Climate Lobby has been advocating for, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, that is, all the money is collected and goes back to households equally, because what the goal of it is to create a market-based solution. The helping states and communities transition their economies, the organization Citizens Climate Lobby believes that's better to keep that separate, as well as so that we can build consensus from a general perspective nationally. Clearly, some states would be more affected by other states with a carbon price, but there are things in the bill that has been introduced to try to address those concerns, like not charging a carbon fee on fuel for farm machinery and other things. And so, it's not a perfect situation. We are trying to find a solution that can benefit the most, and it doesn't, it's not an even thing across every state. I will say
Idaho makes out like a bandit, really. I mean, from a selfish Idaho perspective, we have one natural gas plant, zip. If our senators and Congress people really want to bring home the bacon, this HR 2307 makes sense, because, geothermal, nuclear techs, wind, solar, we got a lot of that here. Now, I don't know about Kentucky. Not going
to. Well, yes. And the other thing that I was going to bring up is what Paul talked about earlier is, the economists have calculated out that 2/3 of households would do better or break even on the money that they receive in relation to their costs, their energy costs. And so it creates this incentive to really become more efficient, not just from a manufacturer standpoint, but individuals can become more efficient and in turn are able to keep more of the dividend that they would receive and not necessarily have to use it all for their fuel. But it is designed so that 2/3 of households are protected from the increased carbon price. And so thanks, Matt, for throwing that in the chat. I also wanted to mention that there's an event coming up. It's on Wednesday, April 23rd, and it's online. and it's to watch Drop, which is a movie, a virtual screening, and it's Drop, Water Connects Us All. This is, I'm going to throw in the chat the registration for it. And let me throw that in there first. Okay, so people that are interested in Drop, again, I'll put in the date and time of this here. This is a really exciting opportunity as well, kind of in the same vein. And what it is it's watching a short film, Drop, Water Connects Us All. And it follows a single drop of water on its journey from the continental divide to the Pacific Ocean, and uncovering the truth from that, from a single drop. And this will be followed by a discussion and Q&A with panelists Hillary Hutchinson, the Drop film producer, owner of Larry's Fly and Supply, and a fly fishing guide, Hillary Lynn, world champion Olympic skier, and David Brooks, executive director of Trout Unlimited. So again, that's something else that is right along the same lines that I think you all might be interested in. And again, that happens on April 13th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. And let's see if there's other questions in the chat here. Or does anyone want to ask a question?
Bill, it's Steve Moyer. Did you mention the big June CCL meeting yet? Sorry if I missed it. I came on late.
Oh, no worries. No, we didn't bring that up, but that is certainly, let me just grab that and throw it in the chat. But we're having a virtual conference coming up in June with Citizens Climate Lobby. And I will just put that in the chat here as well. Let me just find it here real quick.
Well, Bill, I mentioned the previous June and November meetings of being 1,300 people, you know, in June is not unusual, and 600 people in November. I just didn't know what have they decided about this year.
Yep. So this year it's going to be the meeting is good. The conference is going to be in person in DC. I threw it in the chat there. It's on June 11th through 13th of this year. And this is an in-person conference. This will be our first in-person conference since before COVID happened. And we would love to have anyone who's interested in joining us there. This will be a great way to build community and also have the experience of being in DC. There is some groups will be working to lobby in person in DC, which needs to be coordinated with their local chapters. So look for that in if you're involved with Citizens Climate Lobby, look for that at your local chapter. And if you are new to CCL, one thing that I would recommend is to attend the informational session for Citizens Climate Lobby. And that is something that, let me just throw that in the chat. So that informational session is something that's available every Wednesday night. It starts at 6 o'clock Mountain Time, and you just register for that. And that also provides a lot of information for you. And then let's see, I'm trying to keep up here. Angie Winter asked Paul, what concerns do you hear from your conservative fishing buddies when you're out there?
Well, you know, from a fishing perspective, they're worried about losing fishery, and this, especially this issue of the hot weather. You know, they don't really swim into the concept of what's the fix, but they are concerned about, you know, the damage to the fisheries.
Yep. Any other comments? I mean, are there any other things that you can suggest to be asking and talking with your fishermen about when you're out there that might help?
Well, we're not creating another government agency. This is what attracted me to Citizens Climate Lobby in the first place. As a retired business guy, I don't want to get into a whole bunch of legal, stuff that there's gray area in. And the clarity of this made sense to me. I'm also a believer in accountability and responsibility, my own personal and people's own accountability and responsibility. And that to me, it all makes sense to me that, okay, we have this problem, we're exacerbating it, how are we going to, deal with it? And obviously, it's like what happened with the cigarettes, we have a problem with, cigarettes. It's bad for your health. And, let's tax it. There'll be less of it. Now, if somebody wants to reduce taxes elsewhere, great. I'm okay with that. But the very specific idea of taxing fossil fuel going into the atmosphere, we need to do that.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Paul. Another question came up, and I'm not sure if this is in your area or not, but there's curiosity about more specific projects in the Western states that Trout Unlimited is undertaking to mitigate changes in trout streams.
Well, there's a big project in the Blackfoot River that I worked on last fall that's going on. So I know about that one because I was a laborer on that. So there'll be activities again on that upper Blackfoot area. That's the only one I know about locally.
Excellent. Steve Moyer, do you have anything you want to share in that department?
Thanks, Bill. There's just a ton going on that, and it's hard to summarize, but in virtually every Western state, there is good climate change adaptation work. A big feature is connectivity and opening up blockages such as small dams or old irrigation equipment, culverts, bad culverts on highways, to be able to allow salmon and trout to move up into headwaters and then come back down into the main stem to get bigger and fatter. So the connectivity work is really hot right now in many Western states. But also, we're trying to keep the healthy habitats intact to be a good cold water refuge. And then riparian work, where you really sequester carbon in a natural way with healthy riparian habitats. Those are some of the other things that we're doing. But thanks for the question, and thanks for letting me answer.
Of course, it's great to have you here. And we certainly appreciate your support for carbon pricing through Trout Unlimited. And we're just excited to have this type of engagement with anglers from all over the country, probably mainly here in the Mountain West, but all over the country.
I see Eric there, and I can't help but think Salmon Superhighway is a good example of a regional effort to really open up habitat, increase connectivity, and make healthier riparian areas in Oregon. A good regional example of some of the work that we're doing.
A nice thing that Trout Unlimited scientists have made clear is that the very things that TU is pretty good at, restoring and rebuilding habitat streams, for a reason unrelated to climate change, are exactly the things. They also do very, very good things in mitigating impact on Western streams anyway. So it fits hand in glove there.
Werner, do you have something to share? Oh, you're muted.
I was just happy to agree with what you've been saying, and I agree with Steve and Eric.
Okay.
If you get the fly fishing magazine from Trout Unlimited, there are activities going all over the country, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Yeah, it's absolutely not just a Mountain States thing. The Trout Unlimited has a far-reaching, grasp of all kinds of issues all over the country.
Great, thanks, Paul. And Paul, is it okay? I'm just curious, as far as your presentation, is that shareable?
Oh, sure, I don't care.
Okay. If,
Just if I'm ever at the bar, buy me a beer. Anybody steals it, just buy me a cold beer.
okay, Gene Larson, you have a question.
Yeah, hi. This has been fabulous. I'm in Arkansas and we're working on putting a lobby team together about climate affecting trout fishing because it's a big industry, you know, it's a big sector here in our state. And I just want to add, you know, you talked, Paul, about that the economics of climate risks really resounds with conservatives. And last fall, we put together a lobby team around duck hunting because migratory birds are being really affected by climate and the warming weather. And we had an avian ecologist from Arkansas State University join us, and he was fabulous. And he included the numbers, you know, the numbers that the state is benefiting, the economic dollars that come into the state from duck hunting. And so what's at risk, framing, you know, what's at risk for the state. Not only the economic numbers, but then also the traditions. But the economic numbers really resonated. And it was one of our best lobby meetings that we've ever had. So I'm really, you know, I thank you for what you've put together. And we're working with Trout Unlimited members here in our state to put together a team to lobby our members of Congress in June. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Paul. This has been great. Thanks for that comment, Gene. Is there anything like you would last like to wrap up with, Paul, to finish up our night?
Well, anybody can call me if they want to talk. I'm not going to tell you secret fishing places, though. But you can talk to me.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. We really appreciate this. Thanks, everybody, for making time to be with us tonight. The Outdoor Industry Action Team, Laurel and Matt Tucker, great work out there. And so wonderful to be with you tonight. And hope you have a great evening.
Thanks, Bill.